WrestleMania 35 is this Sunday from MetLife Stadium in the shadow of New York City. I'm sure all those New Jersey natives love hearing that on television every week. When you guys fill out forms online, do you have to write in, when they have you write in your city and state? Do you just write in that you live in the shadow of New York City? Because I think that's what WWE thinks. So maybe you just kind of write in, shadow, comma, NYC. This is going to be my 8th straight WrestleMania live and in person. And I will say there have been some really good WrestleManias. There have been some really terrible WrestleManias. But if you've never been to one live, especially in the stadium setting, it is an experience I feel like you should have at least once. I mean, as these shows get longer and longer, it may not be as appealing. But I remember the last time they were at MetLife, they had this great stage set up with the Brooklyn Bridge, and they had the Statue of Liberty on top of the canopy above the ring. From what I understand, without giving away any real major spoilers here, the set this year kind of reminds people of the New York City cityscape. Beyond that, I have no idea. I haven't seen any photos or anything. But it really is to be there live. WrestleMania 33, I still say, is the greatest stage setup they've had for any show ever in their history. Apparently, they had pumped $5 million into that setup in Orlando a few years ago, and you could tell. I mean, it was gorgeous. And to be there live and see it in person is just, it's kind of awe-inspiring, some of these designs they come up with. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what they come up with concept-wise for the stage setup this year. As far as the weather update goes, right now, last I checked, it's supposed to be a dry 64 degrees during the day with a low of 49. So it's going to get colder as the show goes on. But as long as it doesn't rain, it shouldn't be too bad. So if you are coming in, if you're not from the area and you don't know what to wear, probably makes sense to wear a jacket, wear a hoodie, wear something, because you may pay the price for it as the night goes on. Just take my word for it. Brutus the Barber Beefcake was confirmed this week as the final Hall of Fame inductee for the class of 2019. I assume he'll be inducted by Hulk Hogan. There was no mention of that made. Some of the legacy names, some of the legacy inductees have also leaked. This is from WrestleVotes on Twitter. Some of those names, not all of them, some of them include Wahoo McDaniel, Playboy Buddy Rose, and Luna Vachon. Now, you can make a case for all of those guys deserving their own separate inductions into the Hall of Fame, video package treatment, and the whole 9 yards. But Luna is the one that kind of bothered me, because I heard Luna Vachon. I mean, it's nice that they're honoring her, but if any of them, really deserve, I think, their own standalone induction. I mean, like I said, they all do, but Luna should get her own induction. So the fact that they're just sort of lumping her in there and they'll just stick her name on a shirt, or just, kind of stick her name on the official program, and hey, Luna Vachon's a Hall of Famer, I think is a little hollow. So that kind of sucks. But anyway, those are the names so far. Now, as far as WrestleMania goes, 5 p.m. start time for the kickoff show, 7 p.m. for the main card, going all the way until 3 o'clock in the morning, it looks like. I kid, but not by much. And no, you know what? It's no exaggeration for our UK listeners. Yeah, I'm sure the UK people are listening to me right now going, oh, you have no idea. It's true. I mean, really, this is nothing compared to what they have to go through. The pre-show for them doesn't start until 10 p.m. The main card starts at midnight. And who knows how long that's going to go. That's brutal. That is, I sympathize with them. That is brutal. Now, for as bloated as this WrestleMania card is, and I don't even have the final tally written in front of me of what the current match count is up to. It's got to be 16 or 17. By the time the rest of the show goes on the air, it could be 20. But for as bloated as this card is, there is no Dean Ambrose. Ambrose came out after Raw went off the air Monday night to beat up Baron Corbin, and then he took a final bow in front of the crowd in D.C. Happy trails to Dean Ambrose. I said it last week. All these people who just were crowing about, oh, it's all a work, you're all being worked. Boy, they're awfully silent now. Boy, are they silent. And Kevin Owens just came back, and he challenged Daniel Bryan for the WWE title at Fastlane, and he had his WrestleMania plans upended when Kofi Kingston caught fire. It was supposed to be Owens challenging Bryan for the championship originally at WrestleMania. I'll talk about what I would do with Kevin Owens here in a minute. Alexa Bliss is the host of WrestleMania. Elias is the official musical headliner for WrestleMania. I'm sure he'll be interrupted by somebody. John Cena, I would say, has to be the leading candidate right now. I hope not. I just think that would be lame. We've already seen an interaction between them at WrestleMania. The Undertaker, I suppose, is also a possibility. I'll throw another name in there that I haven't seen mentioned, but I think would be kind of cool, and that's The Rock. I'll throw The Rock's name in there as a dark horse. Rock interrupting Elias as a surprise for an impromptu Rock concert at WrestleMania. I think that could be fun. But whatever John Cena is doing, it's being kept very close to the vest. So grab a drink, or 7 or 8, because this may take a while. Let's run down the WrestleMania card, and I'll give my predictions and thoughts as we go along here. We have 3 kickoff matches announced. The Women's Battle Royal, which I will keep saying it until they do it, should be rechristened as the Sensational Invitational, as a tribute to Sherry Martel. The current rundown of participants includes Asuka, Carmella, Naomi, Mandy Rose, Sonya Deville, Lana, Nikki Cross, Dana Brooke, Ruby Riott, Sarah Logan, Liv Morgan, Mickie James, and Zelina Vega. I would have to think there'll be some NXT or maybe even NXT UK names in there. Maybe a Toni Storm, maybe a Rhea Ripley, although I think she's nursing an injury right now. I would have to expect there'll be some NXT names thrown in there as well. And even though she has not formally been announced for this match, her name is not on the list, I think Lacey Evans enters the match. She doesn't just sashay her way down to the ring, which, by the way, it would take her an awfully long time here, however long this ramp is going to be, to walk all the way down to the ring just to turn around and walk right to the back. I think this time she gets into the ring, and I think that Lacey Evans tosses out Asuka to win this Battle Royal. When I said this on Twitter a week ago, people skewered me and said, don't give them ideas. You don't think they already have this idea? You don't think they would do this already on their own? Believe me, I don't have to give them any horrible ideas. They've got enough horrible ideas themselves. On SmackDown Tuesday night, they had EC3, Mandy, Sonya, Andrade, Zelina Vega, Lana, Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows, and Shelton Benjamin against Nikki Cross, Heavy Machinery, Naomi, the Hardys, R-Truth, Carmella, and Asuka in what they billed as the largest mixed tag team match in history, which degenerated into a giant battle royal, a mixed battle royal. They should have just combined these 2 battle royals and had a mixed battle royal at WrestleMania. But it degenerated into this mixed battle royal that ended with Asuka throwing Jeff Hardy out of the ring. So for everybody watching and saying, oh, poor EC3, first of all, you're right. But I also want to use this as a word of caution for another Impact talent who is rumored to have interest from WWE, and that is Eli Drake. Eli Drake used to be, the former Shawn Ricker. He was on The Rock. The Rock had a reality show on TNT many years ago. It might have been that show, The Hero. I don't remember. But anyway, he was signed to a WWE developmental deal. He also, little trivia note, happens to be the last man ever to be managed by the late Paul Bearer. And so, charismatic guy, good look, he's in good shape, he got signed to developmental. There were supposedly some issues where they were unhappy with his tweets or his things he was doing on social media, and so they let him go. And he landed in Impact Wrestling as Eli Drake and got a nice push. I think he might have had a title run. I haven't been following his run there as closely, but I remember talking about him years ago and saying, here's a guy to watch out for. From what I saw of him, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood when he was still there many years ago, very charismatic guy. He can talk. He had all the tools, I thought, to become a really big star. And then all that stuff happened where they let him go. But he has batted down those rumors and reports this week about WWE, signing him or wanting to sign him. He says he talks to people there. He stays in touch with friends and coaches, but nobody has actually made him an offer. So it wasn't like a full-throated, hey, this is bullshit, it's false, or I have no interest, Impact's been a great home for me. It was more him just saying, yeah, I if anybody's had conversations with WWE, it hasn't been me, but yeah, I talk to people there, sure, but nobody's come to me with an offer. Let me just say this. If they actually do make him an offer, run like hell. Because like EC3, he too spent time in developmental. He left, right? He got released, went somewhere else, went to Impact specifically, and like EC3, made himself a star in another company. And look what they've done to EC3 since promoting him back up to the main roster. I say back up to the main roster. He wasn't really on the main roster to begin with. But look what they've done with him since they put him on television. It's like they're punishing him for getting over somewhere else. Either that, or Vince McMahon looks at him and goes, hey, what's Derek Bateman doing back? We'll have him staring in a mirror backstage every week, and then when we have him on television, he'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with The Ascension, and Tyler Breeze, and Titus O'Neil. Oh, that's a great crew for him to be part of. Yeah, let that be a lesson for Eli Drake and anybody else in a similar position thinking of coming back to WWE. So anyway, Lacey Evans is my pick to win the, I don't know how I got off the Women's Battle Royal with that, but Lacey is my pick to win the Women's Battle Royal. Also on the kickoff show, we have the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal with Braun Strowman, Colin Jost and Michael Che from SNL, the Hardy Boys, Andrade Cien Almas, Mustafa Ali, EC3, Shelton Benjamin, Apollo Crews, Titus O'Neil, Jinder Mahal, Tyler Breeze, No Way Jose, Bobby Roode, Chad Gable, Anderson and Gallows, Heavy Machinery, the Lucha House Party, the B-Team, The Ascension, Heath Slater, and Rhino. I said earlier, Kevin Owens has no match at WrestleMania. My idea would be to add him to the Battle Royal, even if only as a late entry. And after Braun Strowman takes care of the two SNL goofs, or I figure, I could see Jost, he's the heel, right? He'll eliminate Michael Che, and as he's gloating and as he's celebrating, Braun catches him and dumps him out of the ring. But then have Kevin Owens eliminate Braun Strowman to win, as sweet revenge for all of the torture that Braun made him suffer through last year. All of the awful things that Braun Strowman did to this poor bastard. This could be Kevin Owens' great moment of redemption here. And I know that, they usually have the memory of a lobotomized frog when it comes to storyline continuity like that. I know I make far too much sense with some of these ideas, but I think that would be a nice little callback, and it would be a big win at WrestleMania for Kevin Owens, instead of him being in the back sitting in catering. Josh emailed me. He said he went back and he listened to episode 384 of the podcast. This would have been around May of 2015. Kevin Owens had just debuted on the main roster, but he was still the NXT champion. And one of the things that he said that I said at the time was, and how I liked that Owens had multiple feuds ongoing all at once. Sami Zayn, Finn Balor, Samoa Joe, John Cena. He had beef with all of them. It was KO against the world. And here he is now. I know he just came back, but he's a man without a role. He's a man without any kind of a direction. And I miss those days, when he had 3 or 4 different people that he could, beef with all at once. And I think they could be doing the same thing with others as well, not just Kevin Owens. It doesn't always have to just be the one-on-one kind of formula, but to keep things interesting. But it's just striking to see what he was doing then and what he's doing now. Kofi took what would have been his spot at WrestleMania. I hope that coming out of WrestleMania, they've got some kind of a plan for this guy. I'm still not convinced he should be a babyface. He's a natural-born heel. I think for a few weeks or even a couple of months, fine, but he needs to get back to what he does best. And what he does best is just that snarky heel Kevin Owens who just insults everybody, doesn't give a shit if the fans cheer for him or not. And that's the Kevin Owens that I think is most entertaining, and hopefully they get back to that very soon. So my 2 picks for the Battle Royals aren't even officially announced for either match. I'm taking a risk, I guess, there, but those are my picks. The final kickoff match is Buddy Murphy defending his Cruiserweight title against Tony Nese. They've had a friendship and an alliance on 205 Live now for many, many months. Tony Nese just won the Cruiserweight tournament to earn the right to challenge for the championship at WrestleMania, and Buddy Murphy didn't take too kindly to that. He found that to be a betrayal. He turned on Tony Nese, who I guess is now a babyface going into this match. Nese, I think, is a New York native, so kind of a hometown guy. And I'm gonna go with Tony Nese here. I think Tony Nese wins the Cruiserweight Championship, and I'd like to see that as much for getting Murphy off of 205 Live as anything else. Because what else is there for him to do? He got a big win in Australia back in the fall. He's had a nice run since, I think, October with this title. We've seen Mustafa Ali make the transition from 205 Live to the main roster. He's a hell of an athlete. He belongs on the main roster. You don't even have to like Mustafa Ali or think he should be wrestling for the WWE title, but you have to admit, he's a talented guy. He has a place on the main roster. If he has a place on the main roster, there's no reason Buddy Murphy shouldn't either. And we're heading into this international shakeup. He needs to be part of that, and he needs to end up on Raw or SmackDown in the next few weeks when they have that big shakeup on TV. Now I think is the right time to get the belt off of him. So I'm picking Tony Nese. They are teasing, as we now, I guess, talk about the main card here, they are teasing a Raw Tag Team title match. Last I checked, this has not yet been officially announced, but there was a backstage segment. They put it up on YouTube, teasing the Revival defending their Raw Tag Team titles against the hometown boys, Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins. I say hometown. Ryder is from Long Island, and Hawkins is from Queens. But remember, we're in the shadow of New York City. So this is their hometown as much as anybody else's hometown. So it's not official, but if it happens, first of all, it's a totally thrown together match. It's weird because on TV for weeks now, we've seen Aleister Black and Ricochet wrestling Dash and Dawson. They beat the champions twice in two different non-title matches. On Monday night, they had a title match. They lost by countout. It would make sense to have a title match here with Black and Ricochet winning after, I'm sure, losing to the War Raiders at the NXT show on Friday night. So instead, they put Black and Ricochet in the SmackDown Tag Team title match. And they stick these two, potentially, in the Raw Tag Team title match with no build whatsoever. Ryder and Hawkins, they got some TV time. This is months ago. They were giving them a little bit of TV time. They came back together. They reunited. They became a team. And then nothing. Absolutely not on Raw. When was the last time we saw them wrestling on Raw? Now all of a sudden they're potentially going to be getting a Raw Tag Team title match? Two guys who can't win a match to save their lives? But it's New York, kind of. And so if ever they were going to break their streak of losses, if Kurt Hawkins was going to finally pick up that big W, and, given how they've treated the Revival, I think they drop the belts here. If they do this match, I think the Revival drop the belts to Ryder and Hawkins. Titles are a joke anyway, so who cares? Give these two a nice WrestleMania moment. I'm picking Hawkins and Ryder to win. Speaking of which, the SmackDown Tag Team titles are on the line in a fatal four-way match. The Usos, the newly signed Usos, they, according to PW Insider, signed their new contracts a few weeks ago, so they're locked in. They're defending their tag titles against The Bar, Rusev and Shinsuke Nakamura, and the team of Aleister Black and Ricochet. Alexa Bliss, she's the host of WrestleMania. She came out on SmackDown Tuesday night and added this match as punishment for the Usos forfeiting their match against the New Day in that gauntlet match the week before. And so here we are with a fatal four-way situation. Rusev, The Bar to me has been there, done that. Talented guys, but I don't need to see them win the tag team titles back here. Rusev and Nakamura, they don't feel like a permanent team to me, nor does Aleister Black and Ricochet, who I think coming out of WrestleMania, they could still team up here and there, but they really need to start focusing on these two as individual solo stars. They should not be a long-term tag team. So I'm picking the Usos to retain, because none of these other teams, I don't think either should be together or appeal to me. And the Usos are, I think, the best tag team they have in this company right now. Who they feud with coming out of WrestleMania, I don't know. The shakeup may answer those questions. Maybe they'll promote a new team up from NXT or something. But I'm picking the Usos to retain the SmackDown belts here. We have Samoa Joe. Despite making his main roster debut 2 years ago, Samoa Joe has yet to wrestle at a single WrestleMania. That all changes on Sunday. when he defends the United States Championship against Rey Mysterio. Maybe. Mysterio hurt his right ankle in his match with Baron Corbin on Raw last Monday night. A match that never should have happened in the first place. This could have all been avoided. I mean, it was a fluky injury. It wasn't Corbin's fault, but if this match didn't happen, then Rey wouldn't have gotten hurt. On Instagram, Rey showed the slow-mo video of him landed awkwardly. As simple as that. He just landed awkwardly on his right ankle and rolled it or whatever he did to it. And he said that he is praying to be ready for WrestleMania. That's encouraging. That's really encouraging when you're praying to be okay for the show. He was supposed to wrestle Andrade Cien Almas on Tuesday. They scrapped that match. I hope Rey can go, if only because his son Dominic in this storyline here is supposed to be at ringside for the match, and I'd really like to see Joe choke him out. So I'm picking Samoa Joe to retain, assuming this match happens. If Rey can't go, I mean, look, I have to assume they already have something planned for John Cena, and it doesn't sound like whatever is planned for Cena involves Kurt Angle. I would like to see in some backup scenario here, Joe throw down the gauntlet. You know, we've seen a lot of people do these U.S. Open challenges before. Samoa Joe says, you know what, I'm going to have my own U.S. Open challenge. Anybody who's got the guts to come out here and try to take this from me, come on down. And that's when John Cena's music hits and John Cena comes out and accepts. That way we at least get a Cena-Joe match, which is one of the things I thought maybe we were heading towards at WrestleMania. This is before they announced that Kurt was going to be having his farewell match. And I thought Cena would be better in that scenario. But if we end up with an impromptu Cena-Joe match at WrestleMania, I wouldn't mind that. Either way, I think Joe retains. We've got Falls Count Anywhere. The Miz takes on Shane McMahon. This is one of the best built matches on this entire card. Whatever you think of the match, maybe the second or third best built match, frankly, of all the matches on this show. And this is a story that dates all the way back to Crown Jewel and the big World Cup tournament they did back in October, where The Miz, quote, hurt himself, and SmackDown was going to have to forfeit their spot in the tournament, and Shane McMahon said, I don't think so. SmackDown's my show. I'll take over here. He wrestled, I think it was Dolph Ziggler, beat him, won the World Cup trophy, and it was this slow burn where Miz was courting Shane every week. I want to be tag team partners, and Shane wouldn't accept, and Shane finally said, look, you better not screw me. I'll team with you, but you better not fuck me over. And they became a tag team, and they won the SmackDown tag team titles before they dropped them at the Elimination Chamber, I think is where they dropped them to the Usos. And it was The Miz in that match who took the losing fall, and I believe it was the same at Fastlane in Miz's hometown. I believe it was The Miz who took the losing fall, and they did the swerve where it wasn't Miz who turned on Shane, it was Shane who turned on Miz. And he beat the crap out of him, and he physically assaulted Miz's dad in the front row, and he's been taunting Miz for weeks now, putting that picture up on the Titantron of him grabbing his father's face. And The Miz has been in the role of heroic babyface, which is not a role that I'm used to seeing The Miz in. It's not, it's kind of like Kevin Owens playing babyface. I don't think it's his natural role long term, but the fans have taken to The Miz. The fans cheer for him, and they're in his corner, and so whatever they've been doing has been working. On SmackDown, Miz beat Sanity in a Falls Count Anywhere 1-on-3 handicap match. It spilled outside of the building into the parking lot. He pinned Eric Young. Shane was in the limo or SUV or whatever it was. He rolled down the window and smiled, and then he drove off. They should bring back the Mean Street Posse here to help Shane out in this match. What's Rodney up to? You know, we see Pete Gas making cameos on the network, on the Edge and Christian show. Pete Gas actually came out with his own book last year. But I've heard nothing about Rodney. Is he alive? Is he still around? Did he and Shane have a falling out? I would love to know. I still think Miz's dad, I assume he'll be at WrestleMania. And I don't know where he'll be sitting, but it's Falls Count Anywhere, so they can pretty much take the match anywhere they want to. Assuming that Mr. Miz is there, I think he gives his son the assist, maybe a nut shot on Shane or a slap. And Miz will end up the victor, picking Miz to win. I'm sure Shane will take some ridiculously, stupidly dangerous, unnecessary bump from a high altitude, maybe the balcony or something. But look, this feud has gone on long enough. They've built it up perfectly here to climax at WrestleMania. We don't always see feuds really reach their peak at WrestleMania anymore. WrestleMania used to be the place where a feud would climax and would end, and then you would start anew. And that still happens sometimes, but a lot of times they just sort of, it's just sort of the next chapter and it just continues on. I don't think this feud needs to continue on at all. I think you blow it off here at WrestleMania. There's no reason for Shane to win if you're going to blow it off. And this would be the perfect place, I think, to give Miz the big win. Bobby Lashley defends the Intercontinental title against the Demon, Finn Balor, which all but guarantees that Balor is getting the belt back. Balor is my pick to win the title. The Demon character is undefeated on the main roster. His only loss with the paint on was to Samoa Joe in a cage match back in NXT, and they love to just ignore that history, pretend like it never happened. The way they did the big reveal, I thought, on Raw was really lame. They had Balor show up on the Titantron as Finn Balor, and he's giving some corny dialogue, and then we see smoke, and when the smoke clears, we see the Demon. And then he sticks his tongue out, and he goes, ah! That's literally what he did. Ah! What's that? So lame. The way they did this was so lame. But I will say this, the Demon entrance, this will be the first time we get a Demon entrance at WrestleMania, I believe. I think the Demon entrance at MetLife is going to look pretty cool. Sasha Banks and Bayley defend their women's tag team titles in a fatal four-way against the Divas of Doom, Beth Phoenix and Natalya, the Samoan sleeping pill of Nia Jax and Tamina, and the Iconics. I know there are a lot of Iconic fans out there. Some people are probably even pulling for them to win the match. The Iconics annoy me. Not in the, oh, they're great heels, put the belts on them kind of way. They annoy me in the get off my TV kind of way. Nia and Tamina should be kept as far away from those belts as possible. So really, for me, it's between Sasha and Bayley and Natty and Beth. And I think it's cool that Beth is back and she looked like a beast on Monday night. She was dominant. She speared Tamina, I think, through the barricade at ringside. She's like the Beth Phoenix of old. She looks great, I think that's great. I think Sasha and Bayley, though, should retain. I don't really see any reason to get the belts off of them. There's no need to take the belts off them so soon, even before they've had a chance to defend them in NXT. Remember, they said they made a pledge. We can defend them on Raw. We can defend them on SmackDown. And then that one week they showed up on NXT and said, hey, you never know. We may come here and defend them. I'd like to see them have the chance to do that. Kurt Angle wrestles his farewell match against Baron Corbin. This farewell tour that Kurt has been on the one hand, it's been cool, the names that he's been back in the ring with one last time. AJ Styles for all of 90 seconds. Samoa Joe. Chad Gable. Not the ideal situation. I think Kurt Angle of 3 or 5 years ago against Chad Gable would have been incredible. The Kurt Angle of 10 years ago against the Chad Gable of today would have been amazing. I think the two of them working together. Ray and Kurt we never got. They did a little bit of a swerve on Monday. It was Ray and Corbin instead. But the other thing about this Kurt Angle farewell tour, and I said this last week, it is painfully obvious that Kurt should have retired years ago. That this retirement is coming at the right time now. It's time for him to step away. But realistically, it's 2 or 3 years too late. He is clearly hurting badly. You watch him, it's painful to watch this guy walk around. He's stiff as a board. And I love Kurt, and I think Kurt is one of the greatest of all time to do this. And it's sad to watch him struggle in this way. And it's completely understandable given this guy's injury history with his knees and his neck. I mean, the things that this guy did are absolutely insane. Absolutely crazy. The guy's out of his mind. So he's slowed down a lot. Part of it is age. He's getting older. He's almost 50 years old, I think. It's time. And I would have hoped for a better opponent, a bigger name, as I believe he did, would hope for the same thing, than Baron Corbin, but it is what it is. Corbin is the one that they're building, and this is why I think, by the way, that Corbin is winning this match. Baron Corbin is my pick to win, not my choice. If I were controlling the situation, this match wouldn't even be happening. But in terms of predictions, who do I think is going to win? I'm picking Baron Corbin. I fully expect them to have Corbin go over here. Like I said, he's the one they're building. Kurt's an old school guy. Kurt may be in a position to be like, hey, I should be losing to this guy. on his final Raw as an active competitor. I don't know why, by the way, they kept calling it his final Raw ever, like he's fucking dying or banned from ever appearing on Raw again. I mean, the guy was the Raw GM for about 18 months. His last Raw as an active competitor is what they should have said. They gave him the final segment, which was nice of them to do. On the other hand, probably the flattest finish to a Raw heading into WrestleMania in many, many years. Maybe ever, but certainly in many, many years. That was the most anticlimactic, dull, boring, horrible, just go-home finish to a Raw before WrestleMania that I've seen. Now, it wasn't, actually, I take back one thing. It wasn't as bad as the tug-of-war over the belt with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. It's like Brock was fighting off some Samoan purse snatcher. That was worse, but this was still pretty bad. He had Corbin squealing in the ankle lock on the ramp to close out the show. I doubt we see the same thing here. We already saw it on Monday. That was what, Kurt was teasing we would see at WrestleMania. I can't wait to tap out Baron Corbin at WrestleMania in front of, 75, 80,000 people. We got to see it on Monday night. Do you think the same exact thing is going to happen on Sunday? I'd like to think so, but no, I don't. Which is why I'm picking Corbin to win. Much as it pains me to say it, look, I have little faith in anything happening here involving John Cena. I think they have other plans for him, whatever those plans are. I'd be happy to be proven wrong. Maybe it's all just one big surprise that they're saving for WrestleMania. But they took whatever happens at WrestleMania, whether Cena's involved or not, forget that. Put that on the side for a second. They took what could have been a really compelling WrestleMania match, even in the physical state that Kurt is in, and let's say he can't go more than 5 or 6 minutes, whatever the case may be. They took what could have been a very compelling build to a match going into WrestleMania, and they killed any interest that I had in it. And I know I'm not alone in saying that. I know many of you listening agree with me on this. The one good thing I will say, at least Kurt gets one last big WrestleMania match in front of 80,000 people as his big send-off. Some guys don't have that luxury. I just got done talking about the Amazing Red earlier. He didn't have one big last, independent blow-off match. He retired in a YouTube video because he's too beat up. Sting. Look, I could think of worse ways to go out than wrestling Seth Rollins for the WWE Championship, but you think Sting wanted to go out that way? Getting hurt the way he did? Not being able to come back for one more big match or a match with The Undertaker that he's still to this day crowing about? Not everybody gets to dictate the terms of their departure. Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, guys like that had these great send-offs where they knew going into WrestleMania, this is it. Even if it turns out that it really wasn't it. But this is it, right? Shawn Michaels, in his mind, this is going to be it for me. I'm going to wrestle The Undertaker. We're going to have another classic match. I get to say goodbye. And he stuck to his guns, for 8.5 years. But that was a great send-off. Ric Flair got one of the all-time great send-offs between his match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania and then what they did on Raw the next night, which is still to this day the greatest ending to a Raw episode ever, was that send-off that Ric Flair got. They went like 25 minutes overtime. They couldn't do that now. They got that hard stop now at 11 p.m., but Kurt Angle gets to go out, maybe not with the opponent he wanted, but he gets a big match at WrestleMania. So I think that's a good thing. Roman Reigns takes on Drew McIntyre. Roman Reigns was not supposed to be on this WrestleMania show. When he announced that his leukemia had returned and he was going to leave to undergo treatment, you had the dingbats who thought it was a work, but for the people with half a brain who knew, hey, this is serious stuff here. I don't think anybody expected that Roman was going to be back in time for WrestleMania. And here he is going into WrestleMania, having a match. It's not a main event level match, but he's having a match with Drew McIntyre, who is a star on the ascent. Now, I will say, Drew hasn't exactly been lighting the world on fire for me, but I like how they've been building him up as a monster. They've been building him up as somebody who can challenge coming out of WrestleMania for the WWE Champion or the Universal Championship, the big red fruit roll-up belt. And, even though they've been building Drew and they've been doing a good job with it, I think Roman ekes out a win here. It's not a dominant win. He ekes out a win and then immediately gets laid out when the match is over by McIntyre. Maybe even with a chair or something. McIntyre snaps. He beats down Roman. This thing isn't over between the two of them. But I don't see them giving Drew the straight, clean win here. I think Roman is going to win this match. He's my pick to win. But again, I think it's going to be one of those barely won kind of scenarios, and then Drew's going to attack him when it's over. AJ Styles takes on Randy Orton. This is one of the WrestleMania matches I'm most looking forward to on Sunday. Maybe probably one of the top 2 or 3 WrestleMania matches I'm looking forward to. Styles and Orton have been kept apart largely over the last few years. They've wrestled, I think, a couple of times on television, never one-on-one before on pay-per-view. And for years I said, man, it's just waiting, right? The big spot where AJ does the phenomenal forearm and Orton just counters it into an RKO, and boy, that's tailor-made for a big WrestleMania finish. Well, they gave it to us on Tuesday in a random segment. They were both guests on the Kevin Owens show, and they were going back and forth and getting real personal with each other, and Orton was talking about how, when AJ was wrestling in high school gyms and armories, I was competing at WrestleMania, and AJ says, you know what, you're right, you were competing at WrestleMania. You were also doing something else I wasn't doing, failing drug tests. Orton said, now that John Cena is off in Hollywood, AJ, you've assumed the role now of corporate bitch. Anyway, this breaks down into a fight. AJ goes for the phenomenal forearm into a picture-perfect RKO. They blew the spot 5 days before WrestleMania, I assume, because Orton is not winning this match. And if they were going to save that for WrestleMania, that has to end the match. I'm sorry. If they save that spot for WrestleMania, Orton has to win. And the fact that they kind of gave it away on TV is one of the things, anyway, that tells me that I think AJ is going to win this match. So I've got AJ getting the win. No holds barred. Batista takes on Triple H. And if Triple H loses, his career is over. This is also going to be Batista's last match. He's said this for years, that he wants to come back. He wants to not just wrestle Triple H, but in interviews, he has said for years he wants to come back and put Triple H over in his final match. Triple H has never beaten Batista one-on-one before. And so I guess this is Big Dave's way of paying him back and saying thank you, because he was such a very pivotal part of Batista's career. Batista owes a lot of his success to Triple H. It was Triple H, and maybe Triple H and Flair together, who sort of handpicked Batista and Randy Orton as the 2 young guys back in 2002, I guess it would have been, or 2003, to be part of Evolution. They were handpicked. And even when they got hurt, there was, I think, a house show match against the Dudleys. It was a disaster because I think Batista got hurt, and I think Bubba Ray maybe stepped on Randy Orton's foot and broke his foot. They both were hurt. They both ended up in the hospital. And even then, I remember hearing Triple H, talk to them and said, look, don't worry about it. Your spots are going to be here when you get back. You are the 2 guys that I have handpicked. He handpicked them for greatness. And to be fair, the company, I'm sure, picked Randy Orton. I mean, they probably just took one look at him, and they knew this guy, they were going to groom him for something big. But Batista caught fire in a way that nobody saw coming. In fact, a spot that was probably going to go to Randy Orton at WrestleMania back in 2005 ended up going to Batista. So you can't, there definitely are situations you can point to where the company shifts its plans because the fans go one way, even though they wanted to go the other way. And that's one example of it. The way the fans were reacting to Batista, they just went with it. It was just organic, and they said, this guy's catching fire. And it took off, and he became a big star. So he owes a lot of his career and a lot of his success, if we're being legit here, to Triple H. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is a case where he really just wants to pay him back for everything that he has done for him. This, to me, is probably the most predictable match outcome on this show. Triple H has not won a WrestleMania match since his win over Sting at WrestleMania 31. Batista, you'd have to go back even farther to find the WrestleMania win for him. He hasn't won a match at WrestleMania since he beat Umaga at WrestleMania 24, over 10 years ago. that will go down as the final WrestleMania win for Batista, because he's not getting one here either. Batista is not winning this match. Triple H is winning, and if this is Batista's send-off, and I believe it is, I think in his mind he probably feels like he's done all he can do. He got the match he wanted. He's got his career in Hollywood. He's not getting any younger. You know, Batista, unlike others, I think is going to stick to his guns on this. I think this is it. I think this is his last match. And I have to say, the build-up for this on the whole, I think, has been very lackluster. I just had higher expectations, I guess, for not the match itself, but the build. And it's been very disappointing to me, although I did like what they did on Monday, I guess. You know, Batista came out, he said nothing. He was in his hometown of D.C. He stood there with the spotlight on him in the ring, and all he said was, "Hunter, kiss my ass." And he put his shades on. He had this big, goofy smile on his face, this big, goofy grin. Big troll face by Big Dave on Raw last Monday. I did think that was great. But on the whole, this build-up, I think, has just been very lackluster. The no-holds-barred stipulation is going to help a lot. Now they can use weapons, and they can do table spots and not risk being disqualified. But I think it's the most predictable outcome on this show. I think Triple H wins. We've got Brock Lesnar defending the Universal Championship against the winner of the 2019 Men's Royal Rumble match, Seth Rollins. Roman Reigns, of course, I talked about him before, he got sick. And as a result of that, he had to surrender the Universal title. He had finally slayed the beast at SummerSlam, only 2 months later to drop the belt, and who got it back? Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar got the belt right back. He has a lot of history with Seth Rollins at WrestleMania, going back to WrestleMania 31, when Rollins cashed in Money in the Bank. He never pinned Brock Lesnar. He screwed him out of the title. He pinned Roman Reigns. Brock lost the championship. Brock tried to kill him, tried to kill Rollins on Raw the next night. Couldn't get his hands on him. Fast forward to later on that year, they had a pay-per-view match that Lesnar totally dominated. He was about to win before The Undertaker popped up and kicked him in the dick, which is something that he ought to get used to. I mean, it happened again to him on Raw last Monday night. He's got to protect the crown jewels there. So that's the history that we know of between these two. Of course, they were also part of that great, and this goes back even before WrestleMania in 2015. They were part of that big triple threat match where Lesnar did pin Rollins in that match, but Rollins is the one member of the Shield that Brock Lesnar has never beaten or pinned straight up one-on-one. One-on-one. Has never pinned Seth Rollins. He's beaten Roman Reigns. He pinned him in the main event last year of WrestleMania. WrestleMania 32, he beat Dean Ambrose, but he's not beaten Seth Rollins. I don't think they've driven that point home hard enough in this story. But this is a story 4 years in the making, and the question is, do you change the title here? In another world, this would have been the main event of the show because the Universal title is positioned as the top title in the company. Brock is one of the biggest attractions, just by virtue of him never showing up. It's kind of a big deal when he actually does show up to wrestle. This apparently was going to possibly be the main event. It came down to the wire whether it was going to be these two or the women. They made the right call to go with the women, but otherwise it would have been this match. But the question is, do you do the title change here, or given some of the other big matches on this show where they can have the babyface get the big, heroic win and the crowd goes crazy for him? Do you do that with Becky, Kofi, and Seth, or do you do it with two of the three? That's the question. If you said to me, you could do it with two, but one has to be sacrificed, who do you sacrifice? I sacrifice Rollins. I'm picking Brock Lesnar to retain the championship here and win this match. And I don't think they have to have Seth win here. In fact, if they want to get the belt on Seth, they don't have to do it here. And they don't have to wait until Saudi Arabia in June. Because that show now has been pushed back. It's not going to be in May. It's going to be in June. They don't even have to wait that long. Why not shock some people by having Brock win? I guess it wouldn't be that shocking anymore because he's won plenty of other matches at WrestleMania. But why not do something that has not been done since Brock Lesnar came back to WWE in 2012? This guy has been back in the company now for 7 years. And we have yet to see a single match with Brock Lesnar on Monday Night Raw. Well, first time for everything. Why not have Lesnar win here? Rollins is just crazed and somehow talks his way into a championship match again on Monday night in Brooklyn against Brock. Brock against the wishes of Paul Heyman, who of course is always saying he doesn't fight for free, but he gets Brock riled up enough and Brock says, yeah, I'll wrestle you. And of course this is against Heyman's wishes. And now we have a big main event on Monday night to promote, a Universal Championship match, a rare Brock Lesnar Monday Night Raw main event. And in that match, Rollins wins the championship. Why not? This card is so bloated and so many matches. I don't even know how many there are right now. You've got these other special moments you can have on the show that'll send the crowd home happy. It's not like this match is even going on last. You really don't need Seth to win this match here. Make Raw feel a little bit more special. I mean, the Raw after Mania is always a special show anyway, but that's what I would consider doing. If the goal is to get the belt on Seth, it doesn't have to be here. It could be the next night. And also, if they've delayed this Saudi Arabia show, and they do keep the belt on Brock, and they're going to keep it on him at least until then, if not even longer, if they're just not going to pull the trigger on Rollins, do we really need another 2 months, at least, of an absentee champion on this show? Have we not had enough time with an absentee champion on Monday Night Raw? They need to get that belt off of him, but I think you save it for Monday night. We've got Daniel Bryan defending the WWE Championship against Kofi Kingston. You know, sometimes the best stories are the ones that you luck into. It was Randy Orton stomping on Mustafa Ali's face and injuring him that led to Kofi Kingston taking Ali's spot in that first gauntlet match they did on SmackDown. He took Ali's spot in the Elimination Chamber, went all the way to the end, came within inches of becoming WWE Champion for the first time. In the end, he fell short. And by the way, poor Ali, right? He lost his spot. Now he lost his name. Hopefully he doesn't lose his wife or his girlfriend to somebody on the main roster or something horrible like that. This guy's lost enough as it is. But as a result of his bad luck, Kofi Kingston has reaped the rewards. Something very cool happened, which is that the fans got behind Kofi Kingston in a way that they haven't in all of these 11 years that he's been on the main roster. And it's interesting to look at really what is a role reversal here. 4 years ago, or 5, I guess now, 5 years ago, was Daniel Bryan in this position, being willed into the WrestleMania main event by the fans, who got behind him as the underdog. And he went all the way to WrestleMania, he overcame the odds, he overcame the authority, and he won the championship. And here we are now, Kofi Kingston being willed into this spot by the fans. Vince McMahon changes his mind. Not going to be Daniel Bryan against Kevin Owens, it's going to be Daniel Bryan against Kofi Kingston. And we don't have the authority faction anymore, but Vince McMahon, there's no higher authority in this company than Vince McFucking-Man, okay? And that's a great name I just created for him, by the way. Vince McFucking-Man, I like that. There's no greater authority in this company than him. It's the same angle played out, only this time Bryan is the heel. And he's basically looking at himself 5 years into the future, and his name is Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston is now in the Daniel Bryan underdog role going into WrestleMania. But you look at a guy like Kofi Kingston and you think, because a lot of people, they can't buy Kofi in this spot. They just can't. Kofi Kingston, he's only, we all know what Billy Graham thinks of Kofi Kingston, and some people agree with that point of view. Kofi Kingston's a small guy. He's too small to be champion. Other people look at him and go, look, it's not about size. I just can't buy into the fact that this guy, who comes out every week looking like a goofball, throwing pancakes into the crowd, is suddenly going to be the WWE champion. Or for where he's been positioned for all these years, in the middle of the card, all of a sudden I'm supposed to take this guy seriously? As a title contender, as a threat to the championship? I think they've done a good job with what they did in the Elimination Chamber and the Gauntlet stuff, of showing you that, yeah, Kofi can be a threat. He fell just short, but he can be a threat. They haven't treated him like a total joke. I mean, he was still coming out the other night throwing pancakes into the crowd. But you're going to have a lot of people who look at Kofi Kingston and say, Kofi Kingston is a good hand. He's a great utility player off the bench. who they could plug into any situation we need him for. He's not the guy on your baseball team that's going to be hitting for home runs, batting .350. He'll be that guy who can, get down a good bunt and, he can have he's a singles hitter, he's a doubles hitter, he's batting .260, .270. That's Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston is the guy who kicked The Miz so hard in the face, in the head, that he left a permanent scar from a Trouble in Paradise kick. Kofi Kingston is the guy who would come up with all these creative, innovative save spots in the Royal Rumble match. He would never win, but boy, this guy was sure creative. Kofi Kingston was the guy who once got a big singles push 10 years ago. Made one mistake in a match and got buried for it. He's the guy who was stuck with two other guys they didn't know what to do with in a faction that had no business getting over as large and as big as it did. But it did. It did get over, and it made those guys more money than they ever could have dreamed of. And years ago, and he's still doing it to this day, but this is not a new development in this storyline. For years now, Xavier Woods has called Kofi Kingston the most underrated, underappreciated talent in all of WWE. And he wanted to make it his mission, not even for himself or for Big E. He wanted to make it his mission, both of them, to see to it that one day Kofi Kingston would become WWE champion. He has said this for years. If you thought the day would come that Kofi Kingston would be challenging for the title at WrestleMania, that's a trick question, because that person doesn't exist. Nobody thought that. Nobody thought that. Not even Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston, until now, never even had a singles match for the WWE title on any show. Forget WrestleMania. Never. In 11 years, he never got a singles match for the championship. Never got a world title opportunity. Not one. This is his first. If you don't count, of course, him being in the Elimination Chamber. This is one-on-one. First time that he's getting a crack at the championship. It may be his first singles match of any kind at WrestleMania. I think it is, actually. I can't remember him having a singles match at all at WrestleMania. So all of these milestones here are being met in this match. And then there's, of course, the other aspect to this. We have the website The Undefeated, which is owned by ESPN. They do these long-form sports articles. They had a whole feature this week on Kofi Kingston's fight to become the 4th black heavyweight champion. Not counting Ron Simmons, I guess, who should be counted, but they're talking WWE only. The article says, and this is from the article, it says, since Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was crowned the inaugural WWE champion in 1963, only 3 black men have held one of the company's heavyweight titles. Mark Henry, Booker T, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And so there, in this article, they're positioning this as Kofi could become number 4. In all the years this company has been operating, he could become number 4. There's a lot of people out there listening to this going, number 4? Fuck that. He's going to be number 1. Because we're talking about the WWE title. We're not talking about the World Heavyweight title. The World Heavyweight title, at one time, which was supposed to be a SmackDown title. This tells you how seriously they were taking the brand split the last time before they ended it. The World Heavyweight title, when Alberto Del Rio had it, was once defended in an opening match on Monday Night Raw. Like it was nothing, like it was a TV title. That's how much stock they put in that big gold belt there for many years. For the WWE title, you can get into a debate with people about whether The Rock counts. Is The Rock black enough? Look, I don't want to have a debate with anybody. I'm tired. I'm tired of hearing the debating on that. People have their opinions. They're very strong opinions, but there are a lot of people who don't think The Rock counts because he doesn't identify as black as much as he really highlights his Samoan heritage. And you can laugh at that, or you can mock that, and you could do that. Everybody has their opinion on it, but to a lot of people, they take this very seriously, and that's how they honestly feel. And to them, Kofi could become the first black WWE champion, whether you think that's accurate or not. And that's a big deal to a lot of people. So yeah, there are people who are going to look at this from that angle. Other people are going to say, who cares? It's not about race. Why does it have to be about race? It's about Kofi. It's about a guy, 11 years, he's busted his ass, and now it's brought him to this point. What a great moment if he wins the championship. Whatever perspective you're coming from, this means a lot to a lot of people. They want to see Kofi pull this thing out in the end. This is a big deal to a lot of people. You know, on Tuesday, they had a contract signing. And I don't know how many of you picked up on this, but they showed Kofi Kingston during one of those backstage segments, I think before they went to commercial. He's in the back. He's got the contract in his hand. And if you look close enough into the text of the contract, the date that they have listed for the event for WrestleMania, the date on the contract is March 10th, which was the date of the Fastlane pay-per-view. Now, call me cynical. I don't really think this is going to happen, but boy, would it piss a lot of people off if Kofi wins, he gets a 3 count, and out comes Vince McMahon to say, wait a minute, the contract was invalid because it had the wrong date on it. I don't think they'd go that far with it, but there's a chance. I wouldn't put it past them. But Michael Cole hosted a contract signing on Tuesday with Bryan and with Kofi. And Bryan was going on, I'm going to give you a life lesson. I think Daniel Bryan in this role that he's been in has been great. Let me just say that. When it was time for Kofi to rebut everything Bryan said, and I don't know why he even let Bryan go on for as long as he did. I always think the babyfaces look dumb when, you know, they let the other guy go on for fucking 5 or 10 minutes uninterrupted. Just bashing them. Finally, Kofi gets the mic. And I don't think it was his strongest night on the microphone. I thought he looked nervous. He's not used to being in this spot. I mean, look, this is his big go-home promo on the WrestleMania, you know, final SmackDown before WrestleMania. He looked very nervous to me. I don't know how many other people may have picked up on it, so that didn't really impress me too much. But I'm picking Kofi Kingston to win this match. I want Kofi Kingston to win. I think he is going to win. I think they're going to give people the big moment at WrestleMania. Not only that, I think he probably is safe. Now that this Saudi show has been pushed back, apparently from May 3rd, I think, to June 7th, I think he's probably safe if he wins it until June. Unless Big E turns on him on the next SmackDown, and then Vince McMahon gives Big E a title match and Big E wins it, which is always possible. That New Day or Big E could turn on Kofi. But with the next Saudi show in June, if they're going to have a WWE title match on that show, remember, Daniel Bryan did not want to go to Saudi Arabia last time. He, like John Cena and others, said, I'm not going. And he didn't. He didn't travel. He was supposed to actually wrestle AJ for the WWE title. He wouldn't go. They had to do the match on TV instead. Now, I could see them looking at this and going, you know, Bryan's probably not going to want to go back to this place again. We should get the title off of him, at least until that show blows over, and then we can put the championship back on him when we're back on American soil. That could very well be the case here. So, I really think, though, that all the signs are pointing to a Kofi win here at WrestleMania, and I hope it happens. But Daniel Bryan, this sort of eco-friendly, environmental madman Daniel Bryan with the hemp belt, I think is a great character, and actually it's a much stronger character than Kofi Kingston is. Bryan should get the belt back. But I think you give Kofi his moment at WrestleMania, and you give the fans the right payoff. They didn't do it with Booker T and Triple H at WrestleMania, which was a very similar and a much more overtly racial tone to that storyline than this one. But it was a similar deal where people like you don't belong in spots like this. People like you aren't champion. People like you are here to entertain and to dance and to be silly. Just like New Day. New Day is goofy and silly and here to entertain. It's not as overtly racial as the angle from 2003, but there are many similarities. And to this day, the ending of that match irks the fuck out of me. I don't want to see a similar thing happen here. Kofi Kingston needs to win this match. And for the first time ever, WWE's 3 favorite words, the women will close out the show at WrestleMania in the main event. It is now winner take all. First winner take all main event at WrestleMania, I believe, since Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Champion versus champion, title for title at WrestleMania 6. One woman will leave with both the Raw and SmackDown women's titles. SmackDown champion Charlotte Flair, Raw champion Ronda Rousey, and Becky Lynch, the winner of the 2019 Women's Royal Rumble match. Joan Jett will sing Ronda Rousey to the ring to her Bad Reputation song. Charlotte against Ronda was really in the minds of a lot of fans, and maybe even the company, but in the minds of a lot of fans, penciled in as far back as a year ago. A lot of fans were convinced that WrestleMania 35 was going to be the first time ever the women would headline, and it was going to be Charlotte against Ronda Rousey. From that moment that Ronda debuted at WrestleMania and looked as good as she did, people were talking about that as the likely and potential main event this year for WrestleMania. Had Roman Reigns not gotten sick, I'm sure he would have been in that spot again. I still think at the end of the day they would have voted to go with Roman against Dean Ambrose was going to be the rumored match for WrestleMania for the championship. But you know what they say about the best laid plans. Shit happens. And a funny thing happened along the way. That is the rise of Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch was doing a whole lot of nothing. She was on the back burner on SmackDown for the longest time. And then I'd say it was probably around May of last year. I didn't hear anybody else talking about this, but she started racking up some wins. And I started talking about how one of the great low-key stories on SmackDown to keep an eye on is this winning streak that all of a sudden Becky Lynch seems to have gone on. And then she kept winning, and she kept winning, and then people started talking about it and acknowledging it, and on commentary they were acknowledging it, until finally she earned the right to challenge for the championship at SummerSlam. And it was going to be Becky against Carmella. Then Charlotte came back. She popped a tit and came back, and they put her in the match at SummerSlam and turned it into a triple threat. And of course, Charlotte got the win, and Becky was screwed out of what should have been a great crowning moment for her. And she confronted her when the match was over, and she smacked the shit out of her and beat her up. And this was supposed to be the big Becky Lynch heel turn, and it didn't quite work out that way. The fans took to Becky Lynch because, first of all, they like her, number one. And number two, they agree with her in storyline that this woman has gotten screwed over. Charlotte Flair is the one who's handed everything. Becky had to start winning matches and winning matches and winning matches to earn the right to challenge for the title. She earned her way into the match. Charlotte came back, got one match on TV that she won, and all of a sudden she's getting a title shot. And the fans resented her for it. They sided with Becky because they could also probably relate to her. Maybe it happened to them in real life. Maybe it happened to them at work. Maybe they worked their ass off and somebody passes them up for a promotion. It's the sort of thing that I think people on a human level can relate to. And like I said, they just like Becky. People like Becky Lynch. And so she became the hottest star in the company. And of course, the stuff with Nia Jax punching her in the face and breaking her nose and the match having to be called off with Ronda, everything that happened along the way, all of the pieces fell into place perfectly for this woman. The stars aligned for Becky Lynch in a way that I'm sure she never could have dreamed of. Just like Kofi. You think Becky Lynch expected that she would be headlining WrestleMania one day? I mean, it's nice to have hopes and dreams. Everybody should have them. Everybody should have something they're fighting for. But do you honestly think either one of them thought this was ever going to happen? Now, on Monday night, they were forced, all three of them, to team up with the stipulation that if they cannot coexist, and if one of them attacks the other, that person would be out of the WrestleMania main event. And so they put them all together for a match against the Riot Squad, who they had vanquished pretty easily in that beat the clock shit on TV the previous week. So now they just put them back in the ring again with the Riot Squad. And they were barely getting along, and then Ronda tagged herself in, and I think it was maybe Sarah Logan, put her in the armbar, tapped her out. As soon as she tapped out and the match was over, the stipulation was lifted. Ronda got up, and she immediately attacked Charlotte. And that's where everything broke down. Becky got in the ring. It's just this massive brawl erupted. The referees came down. These rent-a-cops, independent cops came down to the ring. These indie cops came down to the ring to try to break things up. Charlotte booted one of them in the face. I'm surprised his head didn't land in the 15th row. Holy shit. Did she kick this guy in the face? I hope he got hazard pay for working that night. Either that or sign him to a developmental deal if he's not already signed. And so this giant brawl ended with all three women being handcuffed because they were beating people up. They were beating up cops. They were beating up referees.
Oh my God!
All three ended up in handcuffs. They're still fighting. Even though their hands are cuffed behind their back, they're still kicking and fighting and screaming. And so they escort them to the back. And that's where this thing just got way over the top. They were still fighting. They ended up, I don't know why would they put Becky and Ronda in the back of the same cop car? Well, it's wrestling, that's why. Otherwise, it wouldn't make for good TV. But I thought they had this great camera shot when they put the two of them in the back of the same cop car. And the camera guy gets in position where you could see Ronda's face. And they both have this like 2-second period where they stare at each other. And then they start kicking the shit out of each other. And Ronda kicks the glass out of the window. They take them out of the car. And then somehow, I think it was Becky who got behind the wheel without hands and drove the car and rammed the cop car into the car in front of him. And this thing was just a complete clusterfuck in the best possible way. I enjoyed the shit out of this segment. I think most people did. Some people were, it just wasn't their thing. They thought it was too silly or stupid. But to me, and it kind of goes to the John Oliver segment, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, when he was talking about the things I love about wrestling, and he's showing all these ridiculous angles. And he goes, this is what makes wrestling so great. And you know what? He's right. In a lot of ways, he's right. Wrestling needs stuff like this. For all the serious stuff, you've got to even it out. You got to balance it out. And when they do stuff like this, and it just works, it's the best possible television. And this one segment has had people talking all week. So I think it accomplished exactly what they were looking to accomplish, which is getting people excited about this match. And it lost some steam. They had gotten away from what had made this such an appealing feud and an appealing match going into WrestleMania. And they suddenly got those people who maybe weren't so interested, I think, interested in this match again. And even though I still maintain it should have been one-on-one, it should have been Becky and Ronda, they should have just continued building that up between the two of them. And I'm not the biggest fan of Charlotte being inserted into this match. Charlotte held up her end here in this angle because between the boot to the guy in the ring, and then later on when Ronda was in the backseat of the cop car, she stuck her head out the window, and Charlotte came from out of nowhere with this huge knee and just kneed Ronda right in the side of the head. It was great. It was the highlight of this entire segment. This was great. This was just great train wreck, can't look away television, where they just, all three of them came across like a bunch of crazy people. Now, of course, if this were real, they'd be locked up and they'd throw away the key. And I think it was by the next morning they were released on their own recognizance. They have to, I guess, report back to Little People's Court under the ring at a later date. So that's how that's how they got out of that. That's how all three are now out on bail, or however they want to describe it. But again, silly stuff like this to me is what makes these shows really interesting. The problem is, more often than not, when they do silly shit, it's not funny, nor is it entertaining. It's cringeworthy. But that's not what this was. I really enjoyed this segment. So now the question is, it's winner take all. What are they going to do here? I think you stay the course and go with the obvious outcome, which is Becky Lynch winning both the Raw and the SmackDown Women's Championship. Becky Lynch, I don't care whether Ronda sticks around or not, Becky should get the win here. This has been building for months to a Becky Lynch win. And I think she wins both belts. I'm picking her to go all the way. I think she closes out the show with both belts hoisted up above her head. And I think the way they sort of proceed with this, they're not going to unify the belts. I don't really want to see them unify the belts. I don't think they need to unify the belts right now. I think before the shakeup rolls around, the shakeup's only about 2 weeks away, she's going to be forced to surrender one of the titles, and they may give her the choice of which one. Probably the SmackDown one will end up being vacant. That would be my guess as far as how they handle this. Similar to what they did when the Warrior beat Hogan at WrestleMania 6. He won both belts, but they wouldn't let him defend both belts. So he gave up the Intercontinental. They put it up in a tournament. That was the tournament that Mr. Perfect won to win that belt for the first time. I think we're probably in for a similar situation here. So I think it's Becky and Kofi getting their big crowning moments here at WrestleMania. I think Seth Rollins is the odd man out, at least until Raw the next night. I would seriously consider having Brock wrestle on Raw the next night for the first. I wouldn't make a habit out of it. maybe do it this once. When SmackDown comes to Fox in the fall, if Brock ends up on the SmackDown roster, they can maybe have him wrestle on that debut show maybe. But it's been long. It's been 7 years. It's been 7 years. And every year we talk about how this might be it for Brock. His contract is up. Is he going to go fight in UFC? What's he going to do? Brock's going to be around for a long time, I'm sure, because Brock realizes he can make a shitload of money for very minimal work. Vince McMahon does not want to let Brock Lesnar escape and go somewhere else to wrestle. And so even with a reduced work schedule, he's willing to throw a ridiculous amount of money at this guy. And Brock can get these big payoffs in Saudi Arabia. And it's a great gig. I don't know why he would ever give it up. Why would you give that up to go back to UFC to get punched in the head? Been there, done that, dude. You're not getting any younger. Just take the money and go home. It's a great gig. So every year we have this conversation. Is this it for Brock? Is this it for Brock? No, I don't think it'll ever be it for Brock. I don't think he's going anywhere. But for all this talk about how every year could be his last, where's the harm then in having him work a TV match? As long as you don't make a habit out of it, I don't see what the big deal is. And you might even be able to, bring people in to watch the show who ordinarily wouldn't. With the right angle under the right circumstance, I think it can make for a really exciting show, a really exciting main event. But I think Seth ends up being the odd man out here at WrestleMania. I'll be at MetLife Stadium for the show, so I will not be able to get a YouTube review up right away that night. It'll have to wait until sometime on Monday. So as far as when that might be up, it's got to be up before I leave because I'm going to Raw at Barclays. So I would expect the WrestleMania review will be up on YouTube sometime by midday on Monday. So and I may or may not push it out to the feed to everybody else, Spotify and everything. I probably will, but right now just watch for it on YouTube. And boy, that was exhausting. This is a long freaking show. Oh my God.